Hi folks, in part 1 of this video we took a look at how to open versus Mech, and now let's take a look at how to actually win the game once you have a crude and macro advantage. Now, some of the really important things we're going to look at is how to actually engage from multiple fronts on this map specifically, because fighting head-on against Mech is suicide. Another thing we're going to look at is how to properly control our army, including using infestors to take care of Mech and really how to get the right composition against it. We're going to take a look at how to attack from multiple fronts part 2, because it's that important against Mech. You really can't go head on in their entrenched position. And of course we're going to see how to flank once you do have to fight the right army so the splash damage is minimized, and throughout the game of course we'll see how all these little advantages we gain will really give us enough to finally end the game against our opponent. So stay tuned. Alright folks, so let's take a look at what happens in the second part of the game. Now we just had a pivotal battle where we just basically traded armies, and in this point I need to order as many troops as I can while checking his 4th expansion. Now I make a pretty bad mistake here and I actually push my Broodlords forward my opponent's Thor and Viking army, and of course the Vikings will chew apart all my Thors. Now the good thing about this position that I'm in is because I kept up on my bases, I'm actually really well off on what I can do with my troops. And right here of course, although my opponent is pushing out and it's a very difficult fight for me, it's still an okay situation because of the amount of macro I can put out. And I noticed that he makes an orbital command center, so he's really sure in the amount of troops he has. Now of course I start gathering at my 5th base fairly well and I have a number of troops there, but I understand that I cannot attack him head on. I really can't, so I need to do harassment, and I place that Nidus Swarm right at his of course ledge, and I start of course ordering even more infestors. Because I have all the upgrades for them and energy fungal and all that, I can take control of his Thors. As soon as my Nidus finishes, I put out my troops and I try to keep my opponent off his feet. I want to keep him all over the map, running around and really reacting. I kill through the rocks and I want to attack him on many fronts as possible, just as much as I can. And I see that he divided his troops, and on his main position he doesn't really have that many troops other than the tanks, and I go in and I mind control the tanks and the Thors and kill them through attack move. The point of dividing his army is the Mech army with just a couple of tanks and just a couple of Thors isn't as powerful as all of them together, because there's basically a critical mass of Mech units that becomes all powerful. So you really want to keep your troops attacking from different angles. As you see here, of course I send my roaches in different locations and I have 3 avenues of attack. I have the expansion, his 4th attack position, I have the middle path where I have the creep highway, and I have my various Nidus Worms. At this point right here, I'm very low on gas because of all the upgrades and tech buildings I have, but I start getting my Ultralisks. And of course, Ultralisks and Broodlords are very powerful against Mech units, but they can still lose in a head-on attack. Now my opponent is very unsettled because I attack him from many different positions, and of course my Broodlords catch him off guard, basically unsieged, and I see an opportunity to attack a number of Helions, and I basically come by, fungal growth them, take out a number of free units that he gives away to us, and attack him because I have a more powerful position because he had to pull back a number of his troops. So I feel like everything is okay and it feels like I'm busting through his defense, but his reinforcements were mopping up the other locations, and just the build-up units of course pushed back and kill my attack and crush it completely. But nevertheless, it's alright because I killed a number of workers and mules, and that's a very pleasant thing for me based on the number of bases I have. So right here, you know, I take as many free troops as I can, and this is a very tough spot in this game, of course. I've constantly almost maxed out, and my opponent is in this entrenched position, and it's all about attacking him when he cannot really mount a full defense. You know, roaches and ultralights tanking the damage up front for them are quite good against unsieged mech, but of course if the mech is fully sieged, you can literally lose straight out because the splash damage from those tanks is very threatening. But because of the advantages we accrued earlier in the game, we're able to keep our opponent offset. Now keep in mind, drop tactics are also very, very powerful, especially if you can drop on his production facilities, because Terrans cannot warp in, they cannot spawn from a different hatchery with a lot of larvae. They're forced to have their units come out one at a time. Of course, I do not drop in this game, but that's something you need to keep in mind. You know, the best situation you can have is, you know, to attack him from many angles. But keep in mind, though, not to overcommit with too many troops on, you know, flanking attacks and fronts that aren't the main defensive position because if you commit too many units to other locations, he can actually go ahead and crush you straight on. So right here, of course, I attack his main defensive position with a couple of broodlords and ultralisks and of course corruptors, and the point is to call his army and to keep the amount of, you know, mech units he has to a minimum. If I'm sitting at 200 supply, I might as well go ahead and attack him. You know, that Banshee's harassing, but that's alright. I've got my queen there, and you know, I just want to keep my max army, and I want to snipe as many of his mech units as possible. Now my opponent doesn't have any armor upgrades, he just has attack upgrades, but the 3 attack upgrades mean he does insane and DPS with his tanks and Thors that deal insane damage. Now the important thing is he's sitting on 4 bases and I'm sitting on 5, and in any way I'm gonna have an extra base. And also because he has those mules, he's gonna be mined out quicker. I keep trying to see if there's any other entrances I can attack from. Of course I can't attack from the walled off middle position, and my opponent, you know, tries reinforcing that location where he can you know, stand his ground. But right here, as I got a number of infestors and, you know, a number of broodlords, I'm starting to get ready to, you know, take over his units, get a number of ultras, and of course see if I can try to cull his army a little bit more and see if I can make him maybe unsiege with my broodlords and get a number of harassment done on him to make him a little bit more unsure about his position. Of course, you know, we don't want to give him our units for free, but even though the broodlords do die, they do end up kind of doing a little bit of splash damage. Not the most fortunate result for us, but that's alright, because our income is very high at this point. I try to see if there's any other avenues I can attack from. You can't really build mutalisks later on this late against Mech, because if a couple of Thors catch you with 3 upgrades, the way they do damage will basically crush you. So right here my infestors mind control his units, and through attack move I try to kill him, and I bust through his defense here, but as his main army reinforces, I can do nothing but pull back, because that entrenched Terran army is just so powerful. And while I harass him there, I attack from his main defensive location, and of course get a number of SCD kills and a number of Helian kills with those ultralisks, although they're also quick to die to their other reinforcing part of his army. Now the map is almost mined out at this point, and I really only have 2 bases mining at this point, so I can't really you know, throw units like crazy at him, and this is a very difficult spot in a ZvT mech game like this. But you know, I got a number of infestors and ultras, and I come in here and I force a liftoff, and that's a very beautiful thing for me, because my ultras can go in, and even though I control those Thors, you know, my ultras go in and actually with their splash damage kill so many SCVs. But because of the high HP of the Terran Mech army, as my troops die, I simply don't have enough DPS to clear out his army, because mind control of course only lasts 15 seconds. But I did force a liftoff and killed a number of SCVs. So even though the battle was lost at that point, the war is going very much in my favor. Now gas at this point is a limiting resource, and I know that I need to take his base and try to see if I can do some damage there. Now here I throw some infested Terrans, and actually the more smart thing to do would have been to do fungal growth, because a couple of fungal growths 2 and 2 would have killed all his SCVs and probably won the game in my favor. So keep in mind, if you have opportunities like that, definitely take advantage of those. But again, in the long game, you're mentally worn out and it's very difficult to really do everything you possibly could. I try to see what kind of army composition upgrades he's got, and I know that, you know, attacking him head on is going to be fairly tough. But because of my macro advantage, I do have that opportunity. I built my base right next to the Terran opponent, and I know since I'm mined out and he's got mules, he must be on his last breaths. You know, he can't have any more mining bases other than that one he's trying to defend with all his troops. I'm at 200 limit right here, and you know, it makes sense to attack because of the number of ultras I have, and I try to flank or attack from many different angles towards that, and I see there's very many tanks remaining, but that's right, because my ultras run in and do so much splash damage on the tanks and the SCVs, because they do so much damage in AoE. Even though, you know, I've got no bases left, I know that my opponent doesn't have anything left either, and you know, he can't have a big army come out. Even though he has a lot of production facilities in these days, he doesn't really have any money to really build those. And I, you know, take all my drones and send them over to his base, and I order a couple of Hydralisks and, you know, micro a little bit to snipe that Banshee. And you know, keep in mind, Hydralisks are quite strong units as well. Still, they can do quite a bit of DPS as opposed to roaches, so they aren't that bad to have. But of course, siege tanks can really crush them. As my opponent flies orbital command center over my base, he sees the creep and he sees my hatchery building there, and he really wants to land, but he cannot do that because my hatchery is in the place. So, you know, he's gonna try to take his last push, but since my army is so much more powerful, and since I've had so much more resources, even though Mech is a lot more efficient, he just cannot get enough units out to really fight my overwhelming Zerg army. And through slowly weathering down our opponent, when we're able to really have an advantageous position or have max limit, we are finally able to finish this game. So thank you for your attention, and let's wrap up right now. Alright guys, let's wrap up a little bit about what happened in this very epic ZvT. Now we had, of course, the opening where we accrued a lot of macro advantage and correctly responded to our opponent's moves. Later on, because of our stronger economy, we were able to attack from many different angles, including, of course, using Nidus worms, busting through the rocks, and so on and so forth, and we were able to keep our opponent from really establishing a fully secure entrenched position. We were able to keep him on only 4 bases while we had 5 or 6 ourselves, and because of our strong upgrades, our very high tier army composition, which was exactly what was needed to fight this very strong Mech army, we're eventually able to come through and whittle down our opponent. So I hope this game has been very educational to you folks. Thank you very much, and stay tuned for more videos.